Hey, welcome to this Peace Pod episode on compassion fatigue and trauma tapping. I am your host, Joanna. This is not a podcast on conflict or violence prevention or best practices for our programming. This is about methods to manage trauma, including vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue, resulting from working for those that we care for or are offering support. The episode benefits peace builders and in general, those in the caregiving industry. That includes program officers, researchers, lawyers, therapists, probation officers, or traumatologists who support victims of violence, such as genocide, or are often exposed to information or experiences that cause what is called compassion fatigue. Okay, so what is compassion fatigue? This is a concept that was developed by Charles Figley in 1995. He authored the book Compassion Fatigue, Coping with Secondary Traumatic Stress Disorder for Those Who Treat the Traumatized. According to Figley, compassion fatigue is the natural, consequent behaviors and emotions resulting from knowing about a traumatizing event experienced by a significant other. It is stress resulting from helping or wanting to help a traumatized or suffering person. Charles Figley also mentions that it is a natural and disruptive byproduct of working with traumatized or troubled clients. Some of these clients include people who have experienced sexual and physical abuse, military combat, or community disasters. So why is compassion fatigue worth talking about? In my entire academic and professional life, I've never been taught, trained, or exposed to content for my psychological well-being as an aspiring peace builder, conflict researcher, or even peace practitioner. Not even in a course that I undertook called Peace Building and Psychology during my master's class in 2017 at Makerere University. Peace builders and individuals in the caregiving industry, especially those working outside of structures, have a tendency to place the emotional and physical need of those that they're caring for above their own. It seems honorable and natural, I presume. The reason I emphasize structures is because oftentimes structures such as non-government organizations or government institutions often have support staff to ensure the well-being of their personnel and resources in the event of challenges such as what we are focusing on today. So I'll speak about my personal experience. I will not give you an entire disquisition, but just a tiny background. So I've experienced compassion fatigue before and multiple times. And two factors pushed me to experience this. Number one, the complexity of peace building processes as a peace practitioner. Two, exposure to gritty content around conflict and violence to better my competence in violence prevention programming. And three is the culprit called empathy, which I'll get to a bit later. So regarding the first two, during my master's studies in 2017, I saturated myself with publications and documentaries on some of the saddest violent conflicts. And one which particularly stood out and had an emotional toll on me was on the Final Solution in Germany. It was a very graphic publication. In that same period, I spent about 4 hours straight watching news about conflict and matters of international affairs that seemingly had no end. So I experienced, for the first time, compassion fatigue. And how did I know? I have experienced anxiety and other challenges, but this was unlike anything that I had ever felt before. I was emotionally drained, experienced apathy. Watching the news seemed like daily bread to me, just another story, regardless of how grim it was. And then I even had to abscond from watching this international news for weeks at a time so I could cope with my emotions. And then for the third factor, the empathy. I do have high levels of empathy. So when you combine that experience that leads me to feel a certain type of way emotionally together with my empathy, then it does have some, unfortunate ramifications for my psychological well-being. For example, there was a period of time I worked a lot in the area of juvenile delinquency in Uganda, interacting with children and youth, many orphans. Some had encounters of pedophilia, incest, drug addiction, and also experienced rape. It was a story after story, in and out of remand homes, and often back to where they came from with no support. While I am and was very passionate about youth development and behavioral transformation, given what I knew that perpetrators are often in environments that make them susceptible to victimization, which in turn enables a culture of violence, it seemed as though the efforts that I was putting in or contributing towards their attitudinal and behavioral transformation was like chasing pavements. Peace builders and social workers intend to transform behaviors and lives effectively. And of course, thinking about the likelihood of success in behavioral management comes up. And it's quite daunting when you don't see the intended effects and, listen to the painful experiences of those that you're caring for. But this is part of the job, right? You have to suck it up. As they say, you have to be ethical. And it's unfortunate I hadn't come across a book or technique to deal with this, and so I was on the path to apathy. I've not heard about professors distributing self-help books or giving lectures about these challenges in the classroom, at least not in my experience. I think the most I've heard is do no harm. That concept of do no harm and be conflict sensitive, particularly in research. But that doesn't emphasize the person who is implementing. Yeah, so that combination of getting deeper into violence prevention, my desire to positively influence violent attitudes and behavior, in combination with that empathy, led me to nearly eliminate myself from the pyramid of those I perceived as worthy of support. I kept telling myself the mantra, you can take a mental hit. And this happens a lot in the caregiving industry, albeit at different degrees for different practitioners. I'd like to think that many, especially those who score high on empathy, have at least at one point in time removed themselves from that hierarchy of those who are worthy of being taken care of. Anyway, while I'd like to get more into my experiences and, talk more about vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue, this is not an examination of the concept, but an informational podcast episode. There's a lot more on the topic in Charles Figley's book. You can access it on Amazon or in your local bookstore. So in this podcast, we'll be listening to expert advice from Placide Nkbito, who uses and trains people in the trauma tapping technique, which aims to enable individuals to manage psychological challenges such as vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. And you will be listening to his experiences in the third session of this podcast. The second session of this podcast, I will be telling you about my personal experience in a training on the trauma tapping technique and the epiphany it gave me with regards to my challenge with compassion fatigue. But first, enjoy this musical interlude. You don't know about me. You can't see what I see. Try to bring me down, but I'm free. Uncontrollable. Welcome back to the second session of this episode. In this session, I'd like to quickly run you through my experience during the training of the trauma tapping technique. I attended a training on the trauma tapping technique, a self-help intervention aimed at managing trauma, stress, and anxiety. It was an interesting experience, to say the least. It taught me a lot about what I think of myself as an individual in the caregiving industry, in this case, as a peace builder. During the introductions at the beginning of the training, most individuals mentioned that they wanted to use this tool for their improved mental health and general well-being. But I, without a second thought, mentioned that I wanted to use it in my music therapy program for youth at risk of violence, without even considering it for myself, although I clearly needed it. When I submitted my response, my introduction, and pondered on what everyone else said, I felt that my response, though genuine, was superficial. This is because I was experiencing immense burnout and vicarious trauma from the grimy content that I talked about earlier, that I exposed myself to, as well as the tough interventions that I implement in conflict and violence prevention. It revealed to me how much I played an active role in enabling my vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue, as well as burnout, and where I place myself in the hierarchy of those in the world that deserve being cared for. And to be honest, whenever I listen to a peacemaking tool, one for intrapersonal conflict or emotional health, I'm quick to apply it among beneficiaries of some of my programs, even though I myself need it. What I'm saying is sometimes we underestimate our limitations as human beings. The argument that we make to neglect this limitation is often, in quotes, I can only imagine what victims of violence went through. I have it better so I can take a mental hit. Or a mantra such as, if you're going to be emotional, don't waste your time in this profession. And I'm wondering, is this inadvertent irresponsibility or negligence? You tell me in the comment section. I would certainly love to hear your views. Now, I don't need to mention how detrimental it is for my or anyone's academic and professional life as a peace practitioner if you neglect, if you are, being negligent of this. Okay, moving on. Compassion fatigue targets our mental health. And oftentimes when you're experiencing a mental health challenge, the recourse is medical intervention, oftentimes clinical. But I want to give you a new avenue, a different pathway to addressing this issue. So in this podcast, I'd like to share about the trauma tapping technique. And during that training, I used it and I believe that it is effective. I won't talk about it anymore, but I will let Placide Bito from the Peace Heart Network speak about his experiences using the trauma tapping technique as a survivor of genocide in Rwanda, as well as the experiences of those who he has supported to cope with their trauma from genocide, as well as other community disasters and conflict experiences. So if you are interested in this, and I hope that you are, stick around for Placide's experiences after the interlude.
It's not about the money. Humanity is unity for life. This is our philosophy. Ubuntu connects all of humanity. It's not about the money. Humanity is unity for life. This is our philosophy. Ubuntu connects all of humanity. It's not about the money. Ubuntu. Humanity is unity for life. Ubuntu. This is our philosophy. Ubuntu connects all of humanity. It's not about the money. Humanity is unity for life. This is our philosophy. Ubuntu connects all of humanity. It's not about the money. Humanity is unity for life. This is our philosophy. Ubuntu connects all of humanity. It's not about the money. Humanity is unity for life. This is our philosophy. Ubuntu connects all of humanity.
Hey, so welcome back to the third session of the podcast. We have here Placid Nkubito from the Peaceful Heart Network. Hey, Placid. So could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, I am Placid Nkubito from Rwanda. A student of social work. I'm in Kampala. I'm also a part of a big organization or network called Peaceful Heart Network. I'm a communication officer in East Africa.
Great. Could you speak more about the Peaceful Heart Network and the work that you are doing to support people who have experienced vicarious trauma as well as trauma?
So I'll go just a little bit how it started before I joined the Peaceful Heart Network.
Yes.
As a person who survived the genocide and also the massacre, different massacres in DRC,
Yes.
I've been looking for the healing. I've been part of the Christian organization, being in Prayerful. I was also missionary before. And I didn't know that I was traumatized, and also was also stressed to the level that I couldn't understand what has been going on, because I could have the nightmares, the sleepless nights, like the fatigue every day. I feel like I lost my identity. I could feel like I don't have a hope, like the very strong meaning of life. There's something was really strange. I didn't even love of my country. I was to the point where I wanted to leave the country and I go somewhere, even the place that I didn't know. So there is a founder of the organization I'm working with, which is Peaceful Heart Network. She has been doing a training. So when my time came, I met her in a cafe. So I asked a question. You look like somebody that I can ask questions. And she replied, "What?" I said that I think I'm traumatized. And she started telling me, "How do you know that you're traumatized?" I started telling her the old stories. Then she taught me the tapping, which is trauma tapping technique. And then I went and tried it out. That night, I had very tremendous night. When I found how helpful it was, I said, why not? It's easy to learn. It's very simple. Why I can't teach the other people? Because I know so many people who are like me, who went through the same things that I've been going through, or more than that. So that's how it started. From there, I started teaching from the community, from the church, from one country to another country.
Okay, thank you for that. Could you reveal the name of the founder of the Peaceful Heart Network?
Yeah, her name is Gunilla Hamne.
So I'd like to hear some experiences where you have used the trauma tapping technique. Where have you taken this technique? Who have you trained, and what have been some of the positive effects of this technique on the communities that you've supported? Also, in particular, I'd like to know how you've been able to incorporate this in faith-based institutions, working with reverends and pastors as well as other spiritual leaders. I understand it's secular and you're, introducing it to a spiritual institution. Could you speak more to that?
It's a good question. If you ask me how I've been, like, where and how I've been teaching this technique, there are some places I don't even remember. The first person, I think the first place I went was in the refugee camp. I went into the refugee camp in Rwanda, where the refugees from Burundi, they were when they flew from Burundi, they came. So I was with Gunilla because she was training me, and then after that, I've been training the social workers and the social the volunteer in the prisons, the perpetrators of the genocide, because we could see those people when they leave the community, when they leave their community in the prison, they come back into the society. They come back with the stress, we come back with the trauma. So I had that opportunity. That's where actually I started looking the fatigue from the compassion fatigue. I could go and hear their stories, and then I could think, oh, these people, even if they participated in the loss of my family, in the loss of my country, they also have a problem. And I could go back and I started thinking about that, and I started doing tapping again, that I can be able in the morning to go back, standing in front of them with a non-judgmental attitude, just helping as a human being. So the later on, I got opportunity to go to train in Pakistan, where they have slavery children, where they use them to make the bricks, especially poor families. So I've been in a place of Kenya where there is this conflict resolution opportunity to share with them. Those are what I can say the formal training. They are informal training where I teach people. I just meet in the bus, we started discussing, because I'm a social person. There is time I was in Tanzania, I met a woman who was selling the fruits. In Africa, we sell things on the street. And then we started talking. Then she said, I don't sleep. I have anger and the bitterness. I'm always beating my kids. I started showing the tapping. You can tap on your chest. You can take deep breath. Then in the morning, the next day, I came to buy the same watermelon. And she was telling, what did you do to me? I slept well. I feel so relaxed. I feel the restful in my feelings. So if I mention the places now in Uganda with in the Bidi where they have like a million of refugees with different organizations, if the list can be on and on.
Okay, that's amazing. Okay, so we've been having a conversation about the trauma tapping technique back to back. But what exactly is it? Could you define it, or maybe help us visualize what the process is like while you're conducting the TTT for yourself, as well as training, giving a training to other people?
So I can the way we can visualize it, even if wherever you are, you're listening to us, is a simple technique. Involves two parts. One is a breathing in and breathing out, and the second is just tapping using your hands. Tap 14 parts of our body. So we start from the side of the hands, just tapping in a very soft, not small, just the way you feel it that you're tapping. Then you go to the forehead, like you're doing some massage, like opening up. You tap on the up of the eyebrows. You go on the sides. You under the eyes and under the mouth and the nose, under the mouth, and then on the chest. You go under the arm, on the lips. So you tap like 10 times or 15. It's depending on the time that you have. You go on the small finger with the two fingers on the sides. Yeah, you go to the second one. You finish all 5 fingers. Then you come back to the chest. You breathe in. You breathe out. Then you close your eyes a little bit. You just observe. You breathe again and you breathe. You breathe out. So when it comes to the outcome, we say always it depends, like what you are going through, and sometimes the result comes immediately. There are people who have also a challenge of the self-observation. So many people, they come to us telling, oh, I was feeling this, now I feel like this.
Okay. Yeah, so I've engaged in the trauma tapping technique training with the Peaceful Heart Network this year. And it was part 1 and part 2. And there are ways that people can access this training. And I'm certainly advocating for it, recommending it to the audience, because I'm witness to its effectiveness and those outcomes that you talked about, such as the cooling effect that it has, and even the sense of environmental awareness that, all is well. But could you talk about some of these success stories, the specific success stories that you have heard from the people you've trained, the outcomes that they've experienced following the training? Is there any one story that significantly stands out?
Stories, but I'm going to share with you one of my favorite, and is in the part of the book that we wrote that is on Amazon called Resolving Yesterday. Uh, the guy is his name is Pastor John. He's from South Sudan. He's a refugee here in Uganda. We met also during the training when we were training the refugees. He came when he was there as a pastor who practiced the spirituality. You know, is a big. He's heading like 200 Pentecost churches. He was like saying, "Oh, is this is because it's so simple. It's easy to criticize it." Then he went in the night. He slept and very relaxed way. Then he left. When they asked him to share the testimony, he didn't say anything. He left home. When he reached home, his wife and his kids were asking, "Dad, you look different." And they asked, "Why? What? Like, how do I look?" They say, "You look so. There is the light in your face. There is no this dark face that you no longer have." And you have the smile. You are smiling. And then the kids are saying, Dad, you always look angry and bitter. And then he wrote to us. He said that when we are having a training, I felt there is something that I was releasing from me, the bitterness, the anger. He started sharing with his wife and his kids. They're doing a tapping at home when they are cooking in African settings where they sit around the fire when they are waiting the food and then they can go to sleep. Then he became one of the successful tappers that we have. He's going everywhere, wherever he goes to preach, wherever there is a meeting, where there is this community gathering, he goes there and he started sharing. So when I look back, like how it helped him and how he received it, it is such an encouraging.
I think this experience you've shared is a good way for people to learn more about the trauma tapping technique, the TTT, compassion fatigue, a little bit on trauma and re-traumatization from working in the caregiving industry. And most importantly, how the audience can gain access to the Peaceful Heart Network's training resources and content. I know you have the amazing Winky animated TTT trainer. I watch Winky and I love the feel-good music that is incorporated. You could also mention that. So yeah, please go ahead and give us information of how we can access this.
We have an application of a smartphone. When you go to the Play Store or an Apple, you write self for help. You find the Winky, and then it's like a cartoon, and also it shows how to do this tapping. And also on YouTube, we are called Peaceful Heart Network. You can find the videos in orange color. So we have a page on Instagram. We're called Peaceful Heart Network.
Great.
And we have a page also on Facebook. It's called Peaceful Heart Network. And then any person, we have people around the world. You can contact you when you go to the Facebook. You can message us. We can connect wherever you are. We have a big network of different people who have been learning this training. They can do physical. Also, we do online. We do webinars. Some people can join wherever they are.
Okay, so how often do you have these trainings? Is it monthly, annually, or does it vary?
Well, actually, we do twice in a month. When you go to our website, we announce the webinar there on our website. It's www.peacefulheartnetwork.ce, like Sweden, .org.
Yeah, this information is so important, Placid. I'm very hopeful that people who are experiencing compassion fatigue, as well as other forms of psychological stress, will now have what they need to effectively cope with those challenges. It's also such a blessing, the work that you're doing in peace building. Many times we talk about peace building, we focus so much on post conflict reconstruction and structures, and we tend to leave out issues at the micro or individual level, such as psychological healing. And now we even have this new wave of social justice warriors, particularly the youth, who are taking on very difficult issues such as racism and are beginning to take them very personally. And I think that combination that I spoke about in the beginning of the podcast, having high levels of empathy vis-a-vis your mission. For instance, empathy for minorities. And this fatigue and stress is as a result of the peace building and attitudinal transformation processes being very difficult to cope with. And this has been a similar challenge for me. And this trauma tapping technique can be very useful in such scenarios. And maybe.
Yeah, I was just saying, when it comes to the conflict resolution, the conflict started with the individual and grows
Absolutely.
up to the community. How does it start actually? How does it start? It starts with one person, and then I think it's also like a contagious to the other people, and it becomes a group. And when the group and they start doing activities, so we can ask why those people are behaving the way they are behaving. What is behind there? It can be the indoctrination. It can be the background.
Yeah.
It can be, like the way I mentioned. You will find these people who have been in the prison for different criminals or for different cases. When they go back to the community, because they struggle, they are called thieves. They are called the identity they have already lost, and then because the people being judging them, they are going to be also to make more conflict.